Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sonic Advance commentary. And our adventure continues with the not ice cap zone of this game. I think it's with Ice Paradise. No, ice.
It's just Ice Mountain.
Ice Mountain. Sorry, Ice Paradise is SA2. My apologies.
Can we stop calling it SA2 and SA1? That's confusing.
But that's what they're shortened to, Sonic Advance.
Just call them Advance 1 and Advance 2.
It's not even
that's too many. That's too many syllables.
It's the same
amount
number
of syllables.
No, it's not.
Advance 1,
Advance.
SA1, Advance 2, SA2.
No. Yeah, nice of you to just leave out Sonic in that. Sonic Advance 1.
I didn't ask.
Holy shit,
just call it Advance.
What a mouthful. I'm falling asleep here with how tiring it is to say
I
it.
said just call it Advance 1 and Advance 2. I didn't include the Sonic.
Yeah,
We're not playing Advance Wars.
John, you are routinely the person who just says, oh yeah, 7 is not my favorite one in the series, expecting people to know that you're talking about Final Fantasy 7.
Is that the Brad Pitt movie?
Whatever. Anyway, one thing that we didn't talk about in part 1, I really like the music in this game, despite the fact that it's on the Game Boy Advance, which means that it sounds like it's being put through a broken speaker, and then that broken speaker was also
It's played through a PA system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that said,
It's
I
a
think
crunchy.
I think Ice Mountain's probably my favorite track in the game. I also like Secret Base too.
I will say that I quite like Ice Mountain Zone in general. Like, yeah, not Ice Cap Zone is the first impression that you get out of it, but I think, like, aesthetically, it pulls off Ice Cap Zone better than Ice Cap Zone did.
I think it's because, unlike Ice Cap, it has lush greenery in the background. I think Ice Cap only had mountains.
Yeah. Well, because it was an ice cap, it was just the glacier. Whereas this gives more of a like a frozen lake in the woods kind of feel.
You see this kind of shit in the transition from old Skyrim to Skyrim Special Edition 2. When you mix snow and tundra with, more diverse greenery, the effect is great.
This stage also doesn't really feel like Ice Cap Zone at all. It feels more like, oh god, what's the name? Aquatic Ruin from Sonic 2.
Aquatic Ruin.
Because you've got the mix of water and not water, and if you play well enough, you can mostly avoid.
Ice Cap Zone had water in it, but I don't think there were many places where you could be submerged for very long. I think
only in Act 2.
Yeah, I think the one big water area was actually a bottomless pit. Fucking spikes.
Which is funny because in Act 2 you want to be in the underwater sections because that's where one of the giant rings are.
The other thing about Ice Cap is that the big gameplay thing in Ice Cap was the looping vertical shafts. That's what and it's one of the more speed heavy levels in the game too, where this is one of the more measured levels in the game where you're not just zooming everywhere. There is more expectation for platforming. This is one of the only levels I believe where I can routinely find the special spring as someone other than Tails, if I remember correctly. I think it's not too bad to find it as Sonic or Amy.
I know where it is in the second zone, but it's been a while.
It's occurring to me that even at this point in Sonic Advance 1, we can see the Dimps fixation with randomly strewing the same speed booster device throughout all levels.
It's funny because anyone that has an observant eye watching me play these games for this commentary notices is that John seems to jump the moment an object enters the screen. And that's because I'm damaged. Because I don't know if what's coming up ahead is either a harmless speed booster or an enemy. Because this game, especially towards the later half, just likes to throw enemies in your pathway. For no fucking reason.
It does, yes. The speed booster thing was a major criticism that came up with Sonic 4. And it's interesting to see that that particular quirk of Dimps level design was actually beginning as early as this game. Because in the classic Sonic games, speed boosters were typically treated as a level specific gimmick. You would get them in places like Chemical Plant Zone and Stardust Speedway, which had those nifty
launch base,
which had those nifty bi-directional speed boosters, which were neat.
Yeah.
rather than it being an autopilot design element like people criticize speed boosters for being. It would actually just send you careening in the direction you were already moving when you touched them, which is my favorite kind of speed booster.
Well, I think it's more because the 3D games definitely liked the speed boosters a lot more.
Yes. Yes.
Adventure 1 and Adventure 2 both.
I'm not exactly sure why a tiny conveyor belt that's moving slower than I'm already running speeds me up. But
it's again, it's you know, you could be, well, why can Tails fly when he only has 2 tails? That's not enough to.
Well, yeah, it's a quirk, but like the 2D speed boosters, and in that this applies even to this game, were like these rapidly spinning sort of cylinder things that would squeeze Sonic and shoot him out. Is what is the impression that their design gives me, and that makes a bit more sense than the tiny conveyor belts that the 3D games ended up using.
I don't think that the ones from from Chemical Plant would transition very gracefully into 3D.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I do get what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're in Lost World.
They are.
I have not looked at or touched Lost World.
They actually are in Lost World now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I
only know that because I've been playing it for SGB.
I cannot remember basically anything about Lost World other than the characters are bad. It's Mario Galaxy.
That's literally it.
Lost World was definitely Lost World was
yeah.
definitely trying to recapture some of the classic Sonic aesthetic because it was part of that phase of Sonic's evolution where there was a massive backlash against Sonic being super realistic, so we had blocky trees and stuff for a while there.
Which is so strange because the game it follows as generations, and that was already adhering back to classic Sonic's a cartoonish aesthetic.
Yeah, I know. It's just like they were leaning more into that because the response to it in Generations specifically, and to a point in Colors, was positive. You know.
Yeah.
And they continue to lean into that in Sonic Forces.
Can I? I'm sorry to interrupt you real quick. This is actually an aspect of the level design I actually cannot fucking stand in this game and in SA2 because SA2 does it as well. Slopes going downwards, declines. Is that like the inverse? Is like the inverse of inclines?
Declines and inclines, yes.
Declines, yes.
Yeah.
Declines that lead you to a small ass platform in a physics-based platformer.
Yes.
I wonder. So, for those who've never played an actual GBA screen, it's pretty fucking small. And the Pokeball platforms. I always called these Pokeball platforms. I never really. But yeah. So if you've ever played like a physical GBA, the screen's really small. Like it's not really. It's maybe an inch wider than a Game Boy Color screen. And so this is something that you tend to see a lot in GBA platformers. Is that they have so much more processing power and like resolution. They want the character to look nice. So they make the character sprite generally a little bit bigger. Like Sonic here. The sprites in this game look great.
Yes.
The thing about Sonic's sprite and the camera and the size of the screen is that it's roughly the same as the Genesis games. In fact, you might actually technically have a little bit more view because of the wider screen. But the objects in the environment are more three-dimensional and therefore they look larger. So there's an illusion being cast here that there's more screen crunch than there actually is.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much the level design would be improved just by because it's also not true widescreen. It's like 4:3, I think.
It's well, GBA resolution is wide, but it's not widescreen.
It's not 16:9, but it's wider than 4:3. So like comparing to the classic Sonic games on the Genesis, we do have more screen realism.
But vertically, it's squished.
Yeah, I wonder if this had like a modern. Like if the screen was a little bit bigger, like how much the level design issues would be.
Well, that will require them actually re-releasing Sonic Advance.
The thing is, most of the level design issues in Sonic Advance 1 are predicated from Dimps not quite understanding the classic Sonic design. For example, those inclines leading down to a small-ass platform in a physics-based platformer that John mentioned would never have happened in Sonic's 1 to 3, because whenever they sent you through a speed section into a platforming section, they would always launch you up to stop you, or throw a wall in your way to stop you, or generally just do things so that when an inexperienced blind player reached that point in the level without knowing what was there, something would stop them, so that they could just, pause and take stock and realize that they were in a platforming section before they did any platforming. Whereas the Sonic Advance games have an annoying tendency to launch you directly into the platforming and kill you.
This is what I'm talking about with
Folks,
the grind rails,
someone
by the way.
explain what the fuck we just watched, like, in the last 5 seconds? It's like, why does it just not let you ride the rail?
I have no idea either.
It should...
This is not hard. Sonic jump on rail, Sonic grind rail, Sonic go whoosh.
Sonic just, he really ought to just automatically hit the rail, like, no matter what its incline, and grind down on it. And I think in later games that have grind rails in 2D, that's the method that they go with.
At the very least in Rush, that's what happens. I don't remember 2 or 3 that much.
Although, to be fair, if Advance 1 was going by Sonic Adventure 2 logic, then it probably thought making the grind rails precise to use was part of the appeal of them, because they're pretty precise to use in Sonic Adventure 2. Yeah, you often have to physically jump onto them. There are precious few level design elements that directly, automatically place you on a grind rail.
So, yeah, in Adventure 2, you have to precisely jump onto them, and you also have that weird... You should have died there. You have that weird, like, balancing thing that generally doesn't matter too much if you press and hold the B button, as well. So, there is that. But generally speaking, it's not too... Getting onto a grind rail in Adventure 2 really isn't that hard. It's... The tricky part is, like, in levels that focus on grinding, the learning how to specifically jump from one rail to another, because it works, but it's not a natural movement to do. And I can't really explain it with words. It's like kind of a game feel thing you learn as you play the game. But like in a 2D game where there's really no interactivity at all, a grind rail section is not really any different from a loop-de-loop or just a big downhill slope where it's just like, okay, here's a 5-second thing where Sonic looks cool for a second. You should just be able to jump on it,
In theory, yeah. In practice, he does have a bit of an element where when he lands on the rail, he speeds up rather slowly. And then, as you go up or down, your speed does vary. It could be used for more interesting platforming mechanics than it's used for here. But at the end of the rail, he will always do this sort of flip off of the rail as well. So
I think that the slow start is more meant to be like the thing in a roller coaster where you're at the very top and you don't just go straight down and right away. You like go, kind of the build up.
The thing is, it differs from going just straight down a hill into a loop-de-loop in the sense that you have very little control over your acceleration while it's happening. So you have to deal with that slower build-up rather than just spin dashing out of it. God, I hate the way this game handles bottomless pits.
So it's like, here's the thing. The game really isn't bottomless pit heavy until this stage.
Yes.
Because after this is the rocket zone, right?
Okay, so like sky-based levels like Sky Sanctuary and Wing Fortress are traditionally the levels that would have bottomless pits. But the way this game handles the bottomless pits in the level design seems designed to, like, send you down a hill into the bottomless pit instead of, confronting you with the bottomless pit and making you think, oh no, I have to platform now. And then you're careful around. Look at this area. That slope is just that irritates me.
There's a fucking buzz bomber up here on top of the spring that you're gonna hit that son of a bitch.
You're like matrix dodging those shots.
Yeah.
Well,
Christ alive,
if by
dude.
matrix dodging you mean Eggman designed his buzz bombers to shoot bullets at the speed of turtle, then no.
I more meant that like they just barely grazed him. But yeah, you are right that they are moving about as fast as they would in the Matrix. So we can both be right.
I'm imagining Max Payne fighting a buzz bomber now, and it's just like the buzz bomber's bullet is already moving slowly, and he does his dodge flip into bullet time, and it just stops moving entirely. Like, and he just walks around it.
Hey, Knuckles has the maximum heat gloves in this.
I think this is also, if you're playing as Knuckles, it's an evil Sonic.
No, it's still
Am I remembering
Knuckles.
that correctly?
No,
No,
it's always Knuckles.
No, this
Yeah.
is a metal Knuckles. It's got like Terminator flesh on it, but it's a metal Knuckles. Boom.
No, Sonic Advance.
And he can vomit
Missiles
missiles.
that are bigger than he is.
Oh yeah, look at them using those rotational sprites. This is one of those things that like if you played a lot of, this is like one of the Game Boy Advances like things where it's like, look at how you can rotate these sprites. Isn't it so cool? I guess.
I
guess
do
it's
like
cool.
the Metal Knuckles boss fight. First of all, like, despite having that sort of zombie-like awakening there, it does sort of, like, at first fake you out into thinking you're just fighting regular Knuckles. He even fights in a similar way to his Sonic 3 boss, but as soon as he makes the transition into the TK1000, it starts to become an actually kind of challenging boss fight. They kind of redeemed the Sonic 3 and Knuckles boss fight with this Metal Knuckles encounter.
Yeah, where you have to try.
In general, the Advance games have some really good bosses. I'm not as fond of the Advance 2 chase bosses as the others, but I really like the bosses in these games.
Yeah. I'll get into. I want to say what I think about like the quality of the graphics in the next part, but I do generally agree.